Hello and welcome to this edition of Kennedy Saves the World. Once again, we have to go back to Looney Land, San Francisco, to hear one of the dumbest public servants there speak. Dean Preston, who is on the city's Board of Supervisors, which is essentially the very powerful city council, his district is the Tenderloin, where there's a lot of open-air drug use, and that's like ground zero for pooping on the sidewalk. He says that homelessness is the direct result of capitalism. And this is someone who has a college degree and also a law degree. So this is a learned person who, I don't know if he went through college with his head so far up his ass that he wasn't able to access a real economics textbook. But here you go. This is what is wrong with San Francisco in one person's statement. He is the embodiment of everything that has gone wrong with a once great city. And now they're left with a massive homeless problem, massive fentanyl addiction, scores of people who are overdosing and dying from the drug essentially on a daily basis. And he has the pinko nards to blame capitalism for this. So San Francisco has been on an anti-capitalism push for as long as the city has been in the cultural limelight. Really, I'd say since the late 60s, when my beloved late aunt moved there from Indiana. She was a hippie, she had a dream, and she felt like she could commune with like-minded people. I grew up loving the city and seeing it through her bloodshot eyes because she smoked so much weed. I love you, Aunt Jane. Everyone knows her. Who knows her knows that she smoked a lot of weed, and we adored her for it. Having said that, the things that were special about the city are diminishing because of this anti-capitalist push. So it has been this push for libertine socialism that has made the city so much worse. So you have very high taxes in the city of San Francisco. You also have rent control. So people never leave their apartments because they know if they do that it will be much more difficult, much more expensive for them to go out and subject themselves to the whims of the free market. When you have rent control, when you have this form of oppressive government stabilization, it means that markets cannot exist properly and naturally, and therefore there is no competition. Socialism naturally means having a less competitive capitalistic environment. And when you don't have competition, you essentially have price fixing. And when you have overregulation, that is also a means to make sure that competition is oppressed. And that is the point of San Francisco. That is the point of these policies. It is not that San Francisco is like Miami, that is a bastion for cryptocurrency and artistry and a free exchange of ideas. Miami has become a more capitalistic version of what San Francisco used to thrive in. And that was an environment that attracted cool and interesting people to be in the same place and to create this sort of artistic utopia that didn't exist in a lot of other big cities. That vision, that dream, maybe it was a reality for some time, that has been flushed down the toilet by this government control. And it is people like Dean Preston who are completely irrational. And they don't look at the overall macro effects of capitalism, not only in places like North America, but also in Africa, where, 1 billion people have been lifted out of poverty. More than that. They look at these institutions which are failing, which are bogged down with more regulations, more micro laws, more micromanagement, and the city starts to collapse because there's so much control, there's so much oppression, there is so much regulation that it's impossible to keep up. And then people who don't want to be overregulated, people who want to be in a naturally occurring, flourishing, open free market, they tend to leave because the regulations, whether it's on business or housing, the more you have government involvement, the less flexibility you have. So if you have an inflexible environment where people can't afford to move, and then if they lose their job because these big businesses, that thrive in a capitalistic environment that should not be propped up with cronyism and government policies and handouts and favors, those businesses leave. So what happens when Nordstrom leaves and Whole Foods and Walgreens? Well, they take all those jobs for working class people with them. So people who didn't have housing to begin with because of the tightly regulated rent-controlled environment, and now they don't even have a paycheck, what happens to them? For some of them, they land on the street. For those who suffer from mental illness and are now teetering on the edge of a full-blown drug addiction, those are the people who are chronically homeless in a place like San Francisco. So San Francisco has, like Los Angeles and other big cities, especially on the West Coast, taken tax money to fund these sort of unhoused initiatives. And it doesn't do anything because you can throw all of this tax money after bad ideas. You don't have good outcomes. So it's very easy to blame capitalism, but when you're inviting capitalists to leave, this is what you are left with. If you had more capitalism, if you had fewer regulations, if you had actual competition, then maybe people could afford to live in San Francisco. And when they can't, they leave. And those who can't afford to live anywhere are invited to live on the streets in San Francisco, poop wherever they want, sexually assault the vulnerable, do illegal drugs that are going to kill them. And yes, maybe San Francisco would have it right if they legalize drugs, but that's not what they're doing. By not enforcing quality of life laws that should be enforced for every person, regardless of socioeconomic status or housing, if those laws were enforced across the board, maybe you would see people comporting themselves as though we all had the right to freely associate and go wherever we wanted in a once big and beautiful city. San Francisco is still geographically very, very beautiful. But the people with these ugly political philosophies like Dean Preston, who want to be so anti-capitalistic, this is the end result of your socialistic push. This is what happens. This is the reality that you have created. This is not because Ghirardelli Square or McDonald's or Macy's. This is because of your ideas, taxing people out of a city like this, over-regulating the housing market, over-regulating healthcare, over-regulating insurance. So it makes it an impossibility to seek care, and then not giving any sort of punishment to people who do break the laws, violate other people's rights, assault people. When those laws are not enforced, you have an entirely well-rounded recipe for the whole place to fall apart because you are a red-hearted communistic do-gooder, and this is your good vision. This is your utopia. It's garbage. It is more disgusting than a putrid pile of human waste on a sidewalk. This is not a good operating principle. This is not the way to attract business and people and creativity. This is an invitation for those people to leave and the people you incentivize to come to your city and to sleep on the street because to you they are disposable. That is the end result, the direct end result of your philosophy, which is garbage, which you lie about, and you try and blame the one thing that could make your city better. And that is capitalism. This has been Kennedy Saves the World. I'm Kennedy.
Listen ad-free with a Fox News Podcast Plus subscription on Apple Podcasts, and Amazon Prime members can listen to this show ad-free on the Amazon Music app.
Oh, go ahead and leave me a review while you're there. I'd love to hear what you have to say. You've been listening to Kennedy Saves the World on the Fox News Podcast Network.